Okay, we'll be starting here in a minute or two. Just wanted to welcome everybody to today's program. As a reminder, the chat box is there for you to communicate with fellow participants, including the speakers and yourselves, amongst yourselves as attendees. I'm going to right now enable the chat box for everyone. So feel free to chat. We encourage active participation in the chat box. And also just let us know where you're coming from, what you're interested in today in terms of a particular wine or a particular project. And in a moment here, we'll kind of give you an introduction of the available offerings at our annual or at our special auction for the awards this year. And you'll have an opportunity to bid on some of those items. So we hope you'll join us for that. We'll start here in a minute or two. I see some more people filtering in. So I see we're also live on Facebook and YouTube. For those of you who are participating through those platforms, we will be monitoring our social media channels for questions or comments, and we will share those with our speakers. This is a fast-paced program. We have 7 projects in 6 categories, and we'll be presenting wine selections between each category. So we look forward to today's program, and thank you for joining us today. It's now 12, so I'm going to get us kicked off here. My name is John Haber. I'm the Field Services Director for the California Preservation Foundation, and with me today is the Executive Director of the California Preservation Foundation, Cindy Heitzman. And before we kick off the program today, we wanted to kind of go over the order of presentations and a little bit about why we did this. Cindy, can you talk about why we chose to do this special event this year?
I can, and thank everyone for being here today. This year marks the 40th anniversary of the Preservation Design Awards. It also marks the first year that we've been together meeting. We have the ability to meet in person. So we tried to think of a way to celebrate both events, celebrating the program, 40th year, and the opportunity to be in person, which always involves, for us, food and wine and gathering. And thinking about wines and buildings, we drew a parallel between how one experiences both. And there's commonality in that. It involves it's multisensory, sight, smell, hearing, touching. So we had this quirky idea about pairing buildings with wine. And we found that there's a lot of commonality there. And in particular, we took these groups of buildings and began to group them in ways that we wouldn't ordinarily do when we have an awards program, for example. So we went back 4 years, the years where we haven't been able to meet in person, and began to look at the award-winning projects that met some of the characteristics of wine. And living in Napa Valley, I have a unique experience and perspective of being immersed in both. I also had the good fortune of having a neighbor who is a sommelier, Martha Hoag. So Martha will be joining us. She has since moved to New York, but I want to give a shout out to Martha for helping us through this whole project. And so we're going to kick this off, and I want to thank all of our speakers for the wonderful work that they have done and for joining us today in this fun project. As John mentioned, we have an auction, and all of the folks that are on this program today watching have the first chance to bid on our auction items. And they are all wine experiences and wines from Napa and Sonoma Valley. And so we have got some really interesting wines and experiences. I think my favorite is with Jarvis Winery, a totally underground winery, and it involves personal tours and tastings for 8 in the caves at Jarvis, and magnum of their Lake William wine. So take a look at our auction items and bid. All proceeds from this benefit our programs throughout the year. So John, I'm going to hand it back to you to kick off the program.
Yes, and I will mention briefly that we have 6 themes today, and we've carefully chosen these themes to pair the projects, which have a theme, to the wines, which also match that theme that Martha has selected. So the first theme is spectacle and imagination. and Martha will reveal what wine she's selected for that theme. Within that theme are the two projects of Oakland Monster. Peter Burkholtz from Page and Turnbull will be presenting about the Oakland Monster. We'll also have a virtual tour of the picture bridge at the Langham Huntington Hotel. Robert Chattel is on site at the Langham Huntington now and will be walking down the picture bridge to show us that wonderful project. Then we'll dive into sacred spaces in the inner sanctum. We'll have the First Congregational Church of Long Beach, presented by textile conservator Cara Varnell. We have sustainability, conservation, and stewardship for the Sacramento Municipal Utility District, the headquarters rehabilitation by Christopher Barkley of Dreyfus and Blackford. We have the physical culture category, which is about physical activities, and Martha has selected a wine for that. Of course, the project being presented for that is Fort LA Trails, and Russell Brown, the founder of Fort LA, will be talking a little bit about that. We have Beton Bricks and More, which is presented by Elizabeth Grove from Trainer, who will talk about her work on the San Francisco Animal Care and Control Facility. And finally, we have the big reveal from behind the curtain. That would be the Presidio Theater at the Presidio of San Francisco, presented by Mark Hornberger and Jim Degener from Hornberger and Worstel Architects. So it's going to be a fast-paced thing, as I said. Please feel free to comment, question. Q&A box is for questions, chat is for comments. And first, we're going to kick it off to Robert Chattel, who, Robert, you're welcome to share your screen now and tell us a little bit about the picture bridge. Okay, we see your screen, Robert.
Great. Now you see me. I just want to welcome everyone to this wonderful wine pairing event. I have my sparkling California champagne with me here at the Langham Huntington Hotel. So welcome everyone. I did want to give you a view of the hotel tower. A very controversial project was executed here in the late 80s, early 90s that replaced the hotel tower with a facsimile. Pasadena Heritage had quite a bit of involvement in that project, and through our work here since about 2009, we've been able to execute a few rehabilitation projects in partnership with Pasadena Heritage and the city of Pasadena. So the picture bridge is what you're seeing right now between the Lanai building and the tower. It was constructed in 1913, some years after the original hotel was built in 1907, and then altered and reopened in 1914. So the picture bridge is what's right before us, and I'm going to walk towards it and then take a trip down the bridge itself. It's about 225 feet long. In about 1990, when the new hotel tower opened, they had added a support in the center of the bridge, a temporary support. And as part of our rehabilitation, we were able to remove that support, which was very exciting for us because now the bridge really does span the ravine between the tower and a group of bungalows that are located on the loop road around the hotel. So one of the things that we were able to do for about 10 years or so, we had permanent and temporary shoring at the undercarriage of the bridge. It's a old growth Douglas fir bridge that's always been painted. People thought it was redwood. It was not redwood, Douglas fir. And the cross bracing that you see right here is part of our structural solution, which is a hollow steel section tube steel that is clad in rough sawn, resawn redwood and then painted. So one of the important features of the bridge, and it was designed and built under the oversight of Myron Hunt, a master architect who is based in Pasadena. It has a series of paintings that were added in the 30s during the Great Depression. The very first painting is this one, which is of Mission San Gabriel. The paintings were done by Frank Montague Moore, and the manager of the hotel at the time, Stephen Royce, put up Frank and his wife at the hotel and gave them room and board. And he was paid a small amount for each painting. So they depict California scenes. There are also corresponding poems that are on the bridge. So maybe a little something about the structural retrofit here. So we were able to retain the original configuration of the guardrails, which do not meet current code, but we didn't think that they were a distinct hazard, so we were able to keep them. We shored the entire roof in place, and this was done during COVID, so the hotel was closed, which helped because this is a major thoroughfare between units that are to the west of the main tower and the main tower. And the single posts are generally redwood. So they're about 14 inches square. And those were all replaced with new heavy timber redwood. The paired posts are all hollow steel section, tube steel, clad in redwood. And when you get up close to them, you can start to see how they're boards that are glued to the steel substrate. There are also, let's see if we can see it here, there are also beam pockets that support the roof. So hidden, and it's a good thing that it's all painted, it was always painted. We've been able to hide most of the structural work. So we also put in dowels, cut off redwood dowels to cover much of the structural retrofit that you don't see. One of the things that we were able to also accomplish was to replace what was tile flooring that was added in the 1990s with concrete. So it's much more traditional in its character. And let me just show you sort of what the views you get. This is the Lanai building, which was constructed in the 1960s. The pool, which was one of the first Olympic-sized swimming pools in Los Angeles. It's where swimmers trained for the 1932 Olympics. And then just to the south of the bridge is the Japanese garden, which is another contributing feature of the site. So even though the hotel tower was reconstructed, it's really quite a remarkable historic site. It was officially determined eligible for listing in the National Register as a historic district, so it's listed in the California Register. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you, John, and thank you everyone for joining us today.
Thank you, Robert. And in a moment here, we'll have Martha talk about the wine. But first, we wanted to have Peter Burkholz from working on the Oakland Monster project. And Peter has some images to share of this wonderful, playful project that we have here. That was the design award winner. I think it was in, Peter, was it 2021?
I believe this was a 2021 project.
Yeah. Okay, well,
Yep.
let's hear about the Oakland Monster.
Thanks, John and Cindy, and hello to everyone out there in the CPF Broadcasting Network world. Paige and Turnbull was fortunate to have worked on the Lake Merritt Monster, which you see here is a tiny little champagne bubble sitting on the edge of Lake Merritt. The building, or actually, we first came to know about this project through Facebook and social media. A group formed the Lake Merritt Mid-Century Monster Fan Club. And they went out and did a kind of a call for help. And Paige and Turnbull did a pro bono project with them to restore this fabulous project. The monster was born in 1953. It was the idea of the Oakland Park superintendent at that time, William Penn Mott, who later went on to found the East Bay Regional Park System and then became head of the California Park System and then ultimately the National Park System. So pretty tremendous person that is behind this. His idea was to create an unusual kind of non-blacktop type of play structures for people. And he had a competition formed. CCA instructor Bob Winston, pictured here on the lower center, answered that call. And you see Bob here this is a period, a more recent photo. He died a decade ago, but you see him with a necklace that he had made. So he was a free form artist that was creating jewelry. It's an interesting quote by Bob was, "The man who makes no mistakes does not usually make anything." So Bob kind of went outside his comfort zone and created the monster. Interesting to note that at the same time, there were Noguchi and a group of other people who formed a loose ad hoc group called Play Structures. And you see on the right, publication at the time where they were advertising these types of structures that they were promoting across the world. The building, or the monster, when it was completed, did get a lot of publicity at the time in the late 1950s. And you see a feature spread here on the left with children playing on it. Amazingly, though, the tiny little gossamer bubble is actually comprised of a heavy steel structure, tube steel welded in a shop in Oakland with this kind of framework of flat bar. And then a mesh went over it before the stucco went on top. When we first started working on the project, it's been a few years now, the building, or the structure, had been severely deteriorated. The cement plaster had cracked. Lots of paint had been applied over the years, lots of patches. The underlying steel had corroded. And so there was a pretty sizable effort that went into restore the project, which included, removing of the deteriorated cement plaster, getting down to bare metal, removing the rust, priming it with non-ferrous, with non-corroding paint, putting the mesh back, and then actually patching the cement plaster. Western Specialty Contractors out of San Leandro was the contractor on this. The restoration happened over a series of years. It actually took more than a year to actually get the contract with the city of Oakland. The Friends of the Lake Merritt Monster, as I mentioned, were the ones that were publicizing this, but it was funded by the Lake Merritt Breakfast Club Foundation, which has weekly meetings nearby, and their sole reason for living is to see that Lake Merritt is constantly maintained. City of Oakland Public Works was part of this, Western Specialty Contractors, and Page and Turnbull as well. Interesting to note that the monster is not an only child. There's also a sibling monster that Robert Winston also designed in Modesto. This one's a little bit more cubist and actually a little bit more true to his jewelry. I think the Lake Merritt monster, however, is a winner in my world. Interesting to note that at Sly and the Family Stone took this fabulous photo on the monster in the 70s. After we had worked on this, I went back to the Oakland Landmarks Preservation Advisory Board and suggested that the monster might become Oakland Landmark number 146. And if it were, it would be under criteria 2 for its association with William Mott, as well as Robert Winston. And then also the design style, the modernist design style, in association with Noguchi. And that is all I had to share today. So thank you all for letting me be part of this. Enjoy your wine.
Thank you, Peter. Now is our chance to talk with our sommelier, Martha Hoag, and she's going to talk a little bit about this category, which is spectacle and imagination. So Martha, take it away and let us know why you chose the wine you did and which wine it was. We haven't revealed what it was yet.
Cindy and John helped inspire me with all of these wonderful projects. I was inspired by these two projects to offer up a sparkling wine. California is known for its fabulous sparkling wines, and sparkling wines are meant to spark joy. Both of these projects, in their own whimsy and their own way, spark to me the effervescence of nature and the joy and life milestones. So sparkling wines embody these. The uplift of the bubbles in your glass lifts your eye towards the project on the picture bridge and the joy and the fun of being outside. And as Peter mentioned, it was an effervescent project, a little bubble of joy. So I thought a sparkling wine would go perfectly with these two projects.
Thank you, Martha. We now have an opportunity to hear from the next category. So our next speaker will be the First Congregational Church of Long Beach. And we have Kara Varnell speaking. And Kara, I will share my screen here momentarily, and then you can take it away on the First Congregational project.
Thank you. Yes, I'm Kara Varnell, and I'm not an architectural person, but I'm a textile I'm a textile conservator. And my association with this is that I kind of pushed this project into being starting in 2005. So I'm the co-chair of the committee that oversees the historic preservation projects. So this is our church. It is the oldest building in downtown Long Beach to still serve the purpose for which it was built. It's the same congregation, the same philosophies. We've always been anti-war, we've always been liberal, and it's always stood proudly on that corner. It was built to serve the community and not just for Sunday worship. It was designated in 1977 as a local landmark, and in 2012, it was given a place on the National Register of Historic Places. It's the only building in Long Beach that has rose windows of this size, which are 17 feet in diameter. And I just want to point out in this picture, which was taken in the 20s, I think, it may have been late teens, I'm not sure. Anyway, to note the two facades, they are identical. And there's a third rose window on the other side that faces the roof of the extension of the building. You can't quite see it here. The Southern California papers at the time said it was the first building of its style west of the Mississippi. And I believe that's because of the terracotta use. And what impresses me about that is that this building and all that lovely terracotta work was done, it was built by local labor, and that means it was work done by people that were unfamiliar with that material. And they did such a beautiful job. Anyway, next slide. Do next slide. Yeah. So I pointed out the difference in the facades because the north facade is on the right of your screen and the east facade is on the left. And if you look at the facade on the right, the corbelling at the top is different. It's because in 1933, there was a big earthquake in Long Beach, and that wall collapsed around the window. Still, it's incredible to me that the window didn't suffer much damage, but the wall came down. So when they rebuilt it in 33, they left out a lot of the decorative details. But our project was, we started with the east facade there, and we just kind of jumped in. We didn't really know what we were doing, but we jumped in. So the next, let me just show the next slide here of the interior. Next slide. This is the interior. And now on the right side of the screen is the east window, and the left side of the screen is the north window. And all of the wood inside is mahogany. It is essentially the same interior details as it has always been. And the only differences are in the chancel, which had to, in the 1950s, had to be changed in order to accommodate the 70 rank molar organ that was put in. All right, next slide, please. So this is a close-up of the condition of the tracery around the window. And you'll see that the glass has been replaced already. And what happened here was when we started with this project before John Fiddler, who was our preservation guy. Before John got involved, we kind of panicked and thought we're going to have a problem because we had so many cracks in the windows and so many cracks in the tracery and so many people walking on the sidewalk below. We thought we needed to do something, and we had have a long-standing relationship with J. Michael Designs and Mike Oates, who are a glass restoration company. And so we had Mike take out our windows, and he put in these temporary stained glass replacements, which proved to be a little problematic later on, but we've just kind of jumped in without really knowing what we were doing. But John's team, when John got involved, he brought in his team that started doing analysis of the cracks, and we figured out, or he figured out, why the cracks were happening. And to put this in a little bit of context, to put the building in some context, we are in Long Beach, California, which has one of the major ports in the world, and we're blocks from that port. We are a few blocks from the ocean, and we get a lot of, there's a tremendous amount of moisture, as you can imagine, because we get foggy just like other parts of California. And we have all of the pollution from the port as well. So what they discovered is that the structure, that armature underneath, had rusted, and we'd also had earthquakes and such. So what they decided was they had to replace the armature, take the terracotta off, save what they could, but then replace the rest of it. So next slide. Next slide. And when he came in, John also brought with him RLA Architectural Conservation, Driscoll Studios Architects, the contractors, or our lead contracting company was Gambellini Courtney from Emeryville. And then they worked with our friends at Critical Structures, which is a Long Beach structural engineering company that we'd worked with before, because we've been retrofitted and had other issues over the years. So worked with them. And then, as I said, J. Michael Designs. And the terracotta, they had to take the terracotta off. This was a phenomenal project, because my understanding from John is it is rare to take an entire rose window apart and do the conservation on it. So one of the things that they discovered in their research was, in their investigation initially, is that the window was no longer round, and which created some issues when we already had the windows, the windows had already been conserved, and then we discovered the windows weren't quite round. So that was a bit of a problem created by our enthusiasm and lack of experience when we set out. And they had to make some adjustments when the windows went back in, but you can do the next slide if you wouldn't mind. Yeah. Anyway, so they dismantled it and had the new terracotta made by Darwin Terracotta in England, and then had the new structure made. And this was one of the most amazing things I've ever seen in my life. They had this 300-pound stainless steel structure. They had it laid out on the street, and they had the hole in the building, and they'd done all these measurements. And mind you, we're not dealing with something that's completely round anymore, because the building is settled. It was like the original window was already like 2 inches out of plumb, and it was not, they had to really have this so precise. And they lifted this thing up. It was astonishing, really, to me. And they gently glided it in, and it fit perfectly. And then and you can do the next slide, if you wouldn't mind. Next. And then they put the new terracotta back. They put the new terracotta in, and the color had matched. The color matching was incredible, because it was put back with the existing terracotta that was still reusable. And then the windows went in. You can do the next slide. And this is a shot from the inside with the the plaster frieze that goes around the window and the mahogany tracery. And those are newly restored windows. And then I think I have one more slide. Nope, two more. This is the outside with the new terracotta. And then everything is newly restored. And there's the last slide. So this is now the way that the church stands now. And it's being swallowed up by great big tall buildings that are going up all around it. So this view will probably not be available forever, but there we are. That's it.
Thank you, Kara. That was wonderful to see. I've seen the project before, but I now see it in a new light. So thank you.
You see it in my enthusiastic love of the building light. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Kara. Martha, I know this category was called Sacred Spaces in the Inner Sanctum, and you've chosen a wine for this. So let's hear about that one.
This particular project really inspired me to select a wine that we refer to as the heartbreak grape, as a grape that requires patience and a quiet respect for the spiritual nature of terroir. So I have selected a Pinot Noir for this one. As everyone knows, Pinot Noir is the most difficult grape to grow. However, its delicate stained glass-like appearance, its hushed, complex aromas, they're reverential. They're delicate yet powerful. It's unique and welcoming message. Pinot Noir is the most pairable wine. Once you get it grown and in your glass, it goes with everything you eat. So it's a sense of welcoming. It's a sense of welcoming spiritual nature, like the Congregational Church. So the complexity of growing it, the complexity of making their window, and then the beauty and the visual beauty of it. Everyone is now welcome in the Congregational Church, and Pinot Noir goes with everything you eat.
Thank you, Martha. And now we're going to move on to a category that's very near and dear to my heart, sustainability, conservation, and stewardship. And for this, we did choose multiple projects for all of these categories, but we could only highlight one today. And this one we are highlighting is the Sacramento Municipal Utility District, the SMUD headquarters. And Christopher Barkley from Dreyfus and Blackford will be covering that.
Thank you, John. So this is a really important moment in my career. This building was originally designed by my predecessor here at the firm, Leonard Blackford. He and Albert Dreyfus caught the attention of kind of a young utility while they were still a young firm here in Sacramento, and were selected to design this project, which is a very big and important project for them. They'd done a lot of schools and wood frame buildings before that. And so this was a big moment in the history of the firm. And for me to be able to come along and sort of reimagine and prepare this building for the next 60 to 70 years, I think was a really fun moment, and I'm really proud of it. There are a couple of pictures here from 1960s, shortly after the building opened. Very strong characteristics in international modernist style. You can see that the building was sort of defined by three distinct forms, and each of these respond specifically to the environment and to the solar orientation of the building, which makes it an obvious candidate for the sustainability category here. So the image on the right is the south-facing brisole up above. It has an articulating facade that has two separate settings depending on the time of year, and it actually works quite well. No direct sunlight comes into the building, and it was very sustainable for its time. On the left, what we call the north wing, which is kind of square in plan, there's two floors, and you can see that there are fins on that building as well that are mostly closed. Those actually tracked with the sun, even in 1960, to protect that building, but allow for views when the sun wasn't coming in directly. I'm not advancing for some reason. There we go. So this overview picture shows that a little more clearly. The south wing is the long one in east-west direction on the bottom of the image, and then the north wing up above that. Another major portion of this was the central core, which is the tall portion in the center that extended up above, and that houses stairs, elevators, restrooms, and the mechanical systems for the building. That was one of the areas that we focused on as potentially providing some expansion to the building. And you can see that the areas that are defined by sort of the brown facade elements, the bronze colored ones, 20 feet on each side of the central core was expanded. And that was to allow the ability to include glass for views and daylighting within that central core space, opening up, and you'll see that later in the images that I show, how much that transformed the building. Another important component of this project was the landscape, the historic landscape of the project, and you can start to see some of that here. It was back in 1960, before it was grown up. It was very different, very open, but as you can see, as vegetation has matured, we kept as much as possible, and it became an important part of the project. I like to say that Lynn Blackford designs buildings like submarines, and you can see that this is kind of the case. There is no wasted space or material in the project. The image on the left is part of the open office area. There are web joists at 5 feet on center throughout the entire thing, and they're basically the ceiling plane was set at just about 2 inches below the bottom of those cords. So it became very challenging to get all the mechanical equipment back into the space with new systems. But we were able to do that. And we really did strip the entire facade of the building mostly. There were a lot of there's a lot of hazardous material abatement that needed to happen, that needed to be removed. And then everything was lovingly returned. We updated glazing and really prepared that facade for a lot longer time of use in the future. So as a comparison image, the image on the left is from 1960 as well. And this is where it stands today. So very much like the original, we wanted to really make sure that we didn't change the building in any material form. But the new system includes much better ways of avoiding water intrusion and really protecting those systems, and things like the articulating facade were restored so that they're functioning completely as they were originally intended. One of the probably the most important character defining feature of the project is the tile mural that was completed by renowned artist Wayne Thiebaud. He was a good friend of Len Blackford's back in the day, and when they were working on the project, it was originally designed to have a stone facade at the base of the project, and it was seemingly pretty expensive. And so actually Lynn came up with the idea of using a tile mural as a cost savings measure, which is pretty amazing, because this is now a very priceless part of the building. It was painfully, or painstakingly and painfully, I will admit, restored with this glass ceramic or glass tile mosaic. There's a picture of Wayne here. There, even before he passed, we were able to get him out to the building and have him say a few words about how things went. And it was, I think he was really touched by that moment. We really did try to take a light approach to redefining the building. The image on the left is, you can see part of the landscape that was restored, the boulders and the paving that's in there. The building element behind is part of that addition. So you can see the glazing and the base of that with the white stone. That is all new, but the rest of it is existing. And so we work to define that in the same patterns and materials as the existing, but it's clearly expressed as an addition to the building. On the right, we needed to provide some security measures to the building for the functions that are happening there currently. And so we needed to enclose part of the covered walkway that's around the plinth of the building. And we did so in such a way with to minimize a visual effect on the building. You see, we've kept it as transparent as possible. And it's also removable. So if they ever decide to return the building to its original state, these panels can be easily removed and restore that condition. The lobby was another really important part of the project, and then defining the character. There was a egg crate, a luminous ceiling system that had been covered over with dropped acoustic ceiling panels, and a lot of things had happened to the lobby over the years to make it lose its character. One of the things we did was to return it to a luminous ceiling with a new modern system that incorporates fire sprinklers and all of the other modern requirements that we have today. Also included in this, and it's you can maybe see that where the SMUD sign is located, that section is a little bit wider, and in those areas on each end of the lobby, we were able to incorporate new seismic bracing for the building, as well as accessible restrooms for visitors. On the left side of that image on the right, you can see that there's sort of a walkway and there's someone coming out of there. That is the new security system. Replaced some turnstiles and other very kind of intrusive portions of that while still maintaining the security of the building. The large open office floor plates had really changed a lot over the years. The images on the right are in the condition before we took over the project. There was a really defining sort of quarter turned lighting system. It was actually used to heat the building back in the day. The lighting was part of the heating system. But over time, we didn't want the heat, and of course, and there was overly lit, so they ended up blocking off a lot of the lights. And then they also moved in a bunch of high partitions and really became kind of a rat's maze space. On the left, we opened all of that up, created spaces that allows for everybody in the building to have access to daylight and views outside of the building. A plus side of that is the landscape has matured over the years. Now it becomes a really great backdrop for those views out of the building. Another interior shot here, and you can see those facade elements. These are on the east and west facing facades. These are the articulating fins that change throughout the day, and you can see that it's allowing some filtered light into the building, but otherwise doing a great job of keeping direct sunlight from coming in and heating the space. One of the most significant outcomes of this project was opening of the center core of the building. The image on the right and the image on the left are basically taken from almost the same vantage point. You can see the elevators on the left, restroom doors, and on the image on the right, the wall there is actually where the stair was located previously. It's just an exit stair that went down. There was a large mechanical shaft, made it very compressed. The ceiling was very low. Everything felt really compressed and kind of dingy. And we opened that up with a very large open central stair that extends through all 4 floors of the building and brings in a lot of natural light and really opens up the space within there. It was a major effort, certainly, but well worth the effect. So part of that is this color wayfinding piece that's at the back of the stair. This now really helps to communicate people and space between the north and south wings, and has provided a huge cultural resource for SMUD. There's a little detail at the right that I wanted to share. Even though we did seismic improvements to the building, the difference in floor-to-floor heights made for a situation where there could be a lot of seismic drift, about 4 inches in each direction. And so that detail on the right is a way of providing a safe and secure stair while still allowing for that seismic drift to happen in the event of an earthquake. So last shot here is sort of a comparison. You can see that on the right of the image is the new portion, and the left is the existing portion as restored. It did take a team, a very big, large team, and on the architectural side with Dreyfus and Blackford, we had with Jenny Elsner Associates, who did a lot of really work with the facade and the restoration. On the landscape side, Page and Turnbull was a big part of that, and they worked with Calendar Associates as the landscape architects. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Christopher. Wonderful project. We highlighted it a few years ago during our design awards because I believe it was the Trustees Award for Excellence that year that we had it. So it was the highest honor and certainly deserving of that award. Martha, so this category, we wanted a category that covered sustainable viticulture methods and sustainable wineries. So I'm guessing you picked a wine that kind of fit with that theme. Oh, you're muted, sorry.
So sorry. This project really inspired me. My family is Danish, and mid-century modern and orange are my favorite colors. So I picked my favorite wine. Cabernet Franc is the grape I have selected for this particular style of architecture and this particular project. It is nature's hardiest grape. It is one of the oldest Vitis vinifera grapes. That's the grapes we make wine of. And it lends its DNA to many other grapes. This project lends its DNA to much more modern architecture as we went forward in time. Its firm nature, it also lends itself to the famous Meritage blends of Napa Valley. It is born in the Loire Valley region of France, so it is adaptable in any climate, and it finds its way in many soil types and many climate types. It is also an early warning sign to problems in the vineyard, so it's a little bit of a canary in the coal mine. On its own, it can take on many different disguises or many different outfits. She can be as beautiful as a sparkling pink Cremant de Loire, or she can be a standalone wine grown heartily in the Napa Valley or here in New York State. And it lends its power to the wonderful structured blends that we'll be tasting later on. So Cabernet Franc, the original grape of basically most French wines. So I thought this was a really terrific project to offer up the most structured wine in our portfolio.
Thank you, Martha. And now we're going to turn it over to physical culture. Many of you know we had a number of award winners that were tied to physical activities, everything from pools to baseball fields. And in this case, with Russell Brown here, it was a walking trail that he is the founder of, Fort LA Trails. And we would love to hear about this design award winning project, Russell.
Great, thanks, John. So I'm thrilled to be here. And as mentioned, my name is Russell Brown, and I'm the founder and board chair of Friends of Residential Treasures Los Angeles, also known as Fort LA. And I'm going to start by showing a brief highlight reel, which will demonstrate some of what we do.
I was able to find Fort LA just to explore neighborhoods and historic homes in Los Angeles.
Fort LA hopes to create a sense of Los Angeles community by celebrating the history and influence of the city's residential architecture. Our Trails program enables urban adventurers to learn diverse histories of the city by using architectural treasures and their stories as waypoints for discovery.
So garden apartments are two-story buildings that are organized in courtyards to create a sort of centralized space.
I'm Sarah from Tastemade, and today I am taking you on a tour of Los Angeles' storybook architecture.
Well, I've always thought of LA as a city of strip malls and parking lots. I never really thought of it as an architectural city.
Witch Houses 2, Fairy Tales, Castles, and Cottages is the latest trail offered by Friends of Residential Treasures, or FORT LA. Siddhartha Majumdar is a board member with Fort LA, a serious architect with a secret soft side for storybook-style structures. For him, the houses featured on the tour are more than residential units. They're testaments to someone's imagination.
Look at this leaded window right here.
I love the whimsy. Something like this is sort of the most accessible and fun. And, we all need fun in our lives.
Okay. A little brief backstory. As a native Angelino, I often found myself in the uncomfortable position of defending Los Angeles as an architecturally significant city. And so Fort was founded to celebrate the history and influence of Los Angeles residential architecture. And since we started in 2019, we have developed and launched 4 interlocking programs to pursue this mission. The first program I want to introduce is the Fort Fellowship. We award grants to scholars and artists to produce projects engaging Los Angeles residential architecture. We have supported 8 fellowship projects on topics including post-war Japanese American architects to a series of films about Myron Hunt, whose most significant work is found in Pasadena. Most recently, our project about Mary Louise Schmidt was covered in Architectural Record and unearthed the history of a trailblazing female entrepreneur whose work changed the built landscape of Los Angeles forever. As mentioned in the video, our flagship program is called Fort Trails. Every month, we publish a trail map on a different architectural theme. We work with curators, who we affectionately call trailblazers, to engage their expertise and passion. We have published 37 trails on topics ranging from small Neuter houses to our very popular annual Halloween trail on witch houses, to our most recent trail, which is Over the Top in Truesdale, an exploration of fabulous homes in this region of Beverly Hills. The Discovery Center program is closely linked to the Trails program. Every stop on every trail map has a Discovery Center entry, which is a clearinghouse of information about that structure. You can read biographies of the owners, explore blueprints and historic photographs, read anecdotes about the construction, and find links for further exploration. It's a deep dive of information on that house. The fourth program is Open House, which is our way of going inside. So far, we have published 30 virtual experiences, which, through the eyes of different artists, give our audience the experience of going inside otherwise inaccessible structures. We have produced short documentaries, musical playlists, short stories. We even had a mixologist create a cocktail based on his visit to the W.C. Fields mansion. Through these projects, we hope to provide the essence of architecture through art and creative expression. Fort sees itself as a community building organization. We want people to travel through the city using architecture as waypoints, sort of like how Jonathan Gold inspired urban exploration using food. So through these trails, we hope to expand people's vision and experience of Los Angeles and to create connections through storytelling across the city. Everything is available for free on our website, and I hope you will check it out. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Russell. And Martha, I know this might be a challenging one because I know after I'm out for a long exercise, I don't know if the wine is the first thing I think of, but I'm sure there are some wines that would pair well with physical activity. So I'm curious to see what you selected.
Well, whimsy was the theme of this choice and selection. I've selected rosés for this selection. It's a fresh pink wine that can be made from any red grape. So all grapes are clear on the inside, so any red grape can make a pink or rosé wine. So it's the whimsy that I touched upon. This fresh pink wine is the first wine to be released in the spring, which lures us all outside into the fresh air, the sunshine of LA. And it's the friend of all spring and summer foods. Its youthful nature makes all who drink it feel a little more playful, just like the design that they were selecting for this project.
Thank you, Martha. We now have two themes remaining, and next we're going to be looking at a little more grungy of a topic here with Elizabeth. We had some other projects chosen as well that were more about brutalism, but this one is about the bricks. And Elizabeth, let's hear about the San Francisco Animal Care and Control Facility.
Okay, hello. Trainer HL served as the preservation architect on this project, while the city's Bureau of Architecture was the prime architect. So the San Francisco Animal Care and Control Project is an adaptive reuse of a historic unreinforced masonry building. The design fulfills the agency's mission of providing housing and care to all species while serving the public and remaining open during major emergencies. Constructed in 1893 and expanded 2 years later, the structure originally housed the Market Street Railway Steam Power Plant. The building was determined eligible for both the national and California registers. Additionally, the structure is a contributor to a local historic district. The building shown next to the number on the slide, was rehabilitated to replace the old facilities that cared for animals within the city. The new site was only a few blocks from the existing facility and close to public transit. One goal of the project was to preserve the exterior of the structure by making minimal changes to what people could see from the public right-of-way and repurposing the interior and adding square footage. The envelope, including the roof monitors, were preserved as they can be seen from the nearby freeways. Intermediate floors were added to increase the square footage of the building and to allow for the required program. The needs of various species were considered when designing each space, and the needs of the human occupants were incorporated into the design. The upper photographs show one of the large open spaces within the existing building and highlight how adding a floor created a more usable and functional space. The bottom photos show how you can show some of the exterior changes. These were pretty much limited to reusing the existing openings and replacing the large roll-up doors with storefronts. Part of the project was to maximize the space within the building and plan for future needs. So this meant that one area of the building was left unprogrammed, leaving space for future growth. On the interior, the roof trusses were preserved and the structural interventions minimally impacted the historic fabric. Here you can see how the building was divided on the interior to accommodate the complicated program. Originally, the structure was basically two large open rooms, one for the original structure and one for the addition. A small group of offices was located in one of the corners of the building, and that was removed as part of the project. The interior build-out was pulled away from the shell to expose the masonry and windows. At the lobby area, the volume of the original space was preserved and helps create a welcoming entrance. One of the key components was the preservation of the wood windows, which were in pretty good shape for their age. Where possible, historic glazing was retained or salvaged and reinstalled. And on the windows on the south and west facades, the glazing was completely replaced. Most windows were repaired with only a handful at the roof monitor requiring replacement. Perhaps the most challenging space to create was the outdoor exercise area. The site limitations required a creative solution for this. The animal exercise space was carved out of the center of the building, creating a courtyard. Paint and years of grime were removed from the brick at the existing wall of the new courtyard space, and stairs specially designed for dogs and other four-legged creatures were installed. An additional exterior outdoor space was created on the roof for the animals to enjoy the outdoors. On the interior of the building, the decision was made to encapsulate the paint on the masonry, which allows for an interesting and varied wall texture throughout the building and shows some of the building's history. On the exterior, the masonry, in addition to being very well cleaned, was minimally replaced, and there were minor repairs that occurred around the exterior. The new facility provides shelter for domestic and wild animals, along with veterinary and educational spaces and support space for staff. The design focused on the well-being of the animals and the preservation of this historic warehouse building. Additionally, the project facilitated specific upgrades, and the building now serves as an essential services building for the city of San Francisco. So thank you. And I think Martha's going to talk about my favorite type of wine next.
Yes, Martha, let's hear about that wine. I'm really curious.
Yes, so for this wine, I picked Sauvignon Blanc because it is clean, bright, steely, sheer, and built for purpose. This building was rehabbed to build for a specific purpose. Sauvignon Blanc means wild white in French, and it is meant to go with both wild and the domesticated animals that are now living in this wonderful space. So the transparency of purpose of Sauvignon Blanc wine is built, as we say, built or structured for a purpose. This one is clean, it's bright, it's sheer, and it's broad-shouldered, so it can serve a multiplicity of uses, but it is most known for its brightness, its lovely complexity of nose, and again, the transparency of its purpose. We can see the animals have a new place to live.
Thank you. And to close today's program, we thought it appropriate to end with a theater. You know, whether the curtain is opening or the curtain is closing, I don't know, but Mark and Jim will be talking about a very special theater that I've been to and was just stunning. It's stunning to see in person. So if you ever have a chance, hope you can see a show there. So Mark, let's hear about the Presidio Theater.
Jonathan, thank you, and thank Cindy as well so much for this, and welcome everyone. I'm Mark Hornberger. I'm here with Jim Degner. We were the architects for the Presidio Theater project. You can see here on our slide the location of Presidio Theater in the historic main post parade ground here, Montgomery Street, and the theater built in 1939 as a purpose-built movie theater for the post. The army that inhabited the Presidio then used this not only for movie entertainment for the troops stationed at the post, but also for lectures and to make presentations, building morale. Our client, Peggy Haas, who's of the Haas family, Levi Strauss fame, had seen the theater and herself a budding thespian interested in community theater, thought it would be a wonderful gift to both the Presidio, the city of San Francisco, and the region to actually take the existing decrepit and out of use theater, which had been closed continuously since the mid-1990s and in disrepair, bring it back to a new life for community-based theater. And so we began our work looking at the building, trying to discover existing drawing source that they might have in local archives. And we worked closely with Ruchira Nagaswaran, Frederick Knapp on the tax credit aspects of this. So in addition to being a full rehabilitation, this is a tax credit project. And we worked through both Presidio Trust, SHPO at the state level, and NPS. And there were a couple of things that really were dramatic program elements for the project. You can see here in blue the front of house spaces, including the audience hall in the center, which originally had almost 900 seats. All the original seats had been removed and destroyed and replaced over a period of time with non-historic seats. In green, you see back of house, and the original theater basically along these bounds that I'm showing with my cursor, in order to accommodate a modern program, public bathrooms, a green room, back of house support space, a gathering area for guests and the audience needed to be expanded. So working with the Trust, SHPO, and NPS, we designed the series of pavilions. You can see how the hyphens separate those pavilions from the original theater building. But because the program was quite large, we needed to actually put much of the program below grade so it wouldn't overwhelm the scale of the existing building. So here at the lower level, you can see how we inserted by excavating beneath the audience hall and stage, new dressing rooms, costume storage areas, a rehearsal hall, public bathrooms, public gathering areas, all basically below grade. The other item that really was striking about the project program, the existing hall had a very shallow stage, only about 14 to 16 feet in depth. And a typical modern stage, not including the crossover behind the stage, is just slightly under 30 feet in depth. So to accommodate this without expanding the footprint of the theater into the adjoining streets, which are part of the Presidio Historic District, we actually moved, and Jim will talk about this shortly, moved the 10-ton historic plaster proscenium arch forward by 16 feet into the audience hall, which allowed us to create new handicapped access ramps to the stage and upgrade the acoustics of the hall while keeping the basic shape similar. And so here you see in a historic photo, Bob Hope giving a small comedy and music presentation on this very shallow stage. The concrete wall of the existing building was right here behind the movie screen. But you can see the historic plaster proscenium side arch here, the skirt of the stage, and of course how tight these old seats were at the time. But the theater that we found, this shows that after the remediation from mold and asbestos, was in this condition when we found it. So I'd like Jim just to talk a little bit about the audience hall and proscenium and the process of these rehabilitation efforts. Jim?
Yeah, well, what was special about the auditorium was sort of this modernist kind of Art Deco-y like design, and especially these flying saucers that we nicknamed up in the ceiling, which were actually the source of the HVAC as well as lighting. And we were determined to keep those. Now, when we changed the size of the auditorium, we had to respace them. We kept the two in the back in the same location. Unfortunately, those were the most damaged. But then we moved the other four kind of geometrically appropriately closer, you know, while the stage moved forward. The other thing we discovered when we had taken off all the weird siding they had put on in the 60s was this old material that we nicknamed the shredded wheat, which was this kind of smashed cane product that was an acoustic material, didn't have asbestos in it, from like the 1930s. And of course, we kind of fell in love with it, but it was not the right thing for acoustics because we didn't want to absorb sound, we wanted to reflect it. But we did need it on the back wall, so we kept it on the back wall, and then we mocked it on the sides with a hard material with the same pattern. So we brought back this pattern, which you can kind of see in the edge of that old Bob Hope photo. It was sort of light and dark. And here's the proscenium, which was this big plaster thing, which we originally were going to cut up into like 7 pieces to move. But working with the contractor, they were very creative and helped us figure out that, you know, it was their decision to say, hey, we can move this all at once. And they had this guy who made these giant skateboards that we put the thing on. And it was really a matter of big guys with winches and walkie-talkies in a sweaty, 6 hours. And this thing slowly moved forward, that was an exciting day. And then, we called this the ballroom floor. This was the scaffolding where they got up and they retouched all the plaster work. This is the existing plaster work we saved, but then the back half of the theater we took out so we could have it open, and this was an acoustic issue, and we put in a fabric ceiling so that the volume of the theater wasn't pinched, which screwed up the sound. So, part of the whole acoustic plan of this, and it was old school acoustic design, was reflective walls, the back wall, and all the surfaces facing the stage were absorptive. So we changed some of the walls in front of like where the seating was to have acoustic material. And then the very back one, I guess 2/5 of the field of the ceiling is Eurospan. And above that is the sort of the upper volume of the attic. And in that we hung pool noodles, like a forest of pool noodles. So the sound goes up there and gets absorbed. And we just sort of hoped on the opening day, there was a girls' choir without microphones. I was sitting in like the middle of the theater and it sounded perfect. And it was just like, wow, it actually worked. And at one point,
here's the big reveal
right,
that Jim's leading up to, which is, the stage as it is today, open curtains, and now you see a full deep stage, rigging, and the ability to accommodate dance troupes, full orchestras, live theatrical performances, high school graduations, just everything, but with superb acoustics. So thank you, Dennis Paoletti, who helped us. He and Jim worked hand in hand. And so we have a very bright hall. It's very sensitive to voice. So you can come into the hall, you can speak, you can sing, you can talk without amplification and be beautifully heard throughout the hall. But we also spent a lot of effort trying to save and reuse individual pieces. So here, the entrance to one of the vomitoria, we have an even seats and an odd seats entrance. And so all the original hardware Jim and his team went through saved it, saved doors, saved closers, rehabbed them, brought back the plaster walls. And of course, the big reveal here is there's the historic proscenium arch back, but in its new position, we have wonderful ADA access directly to the stage here. The replication of the striped homosote wheat board panels, but in a new bright faceted surface that works acoustically, and a new seat count. And so the hall has become a really wonderful place for a whole series of different kinds of family audiences for community theater. And the building has become a respectful neighbor to its setting in the main post. And just like a good Cabernet, over a period of time, will open up, evolve, and gain its unique life. So back to you, Jonathan and Martha.
Thank you, Mark and Jim. That was such a wonderful presentation that I'm sure reflects what Martha's just about to reveal here. We're calling this category the big reveal, and it's the final reveal of the day. So, Martha, what did you pick for the Presidio Theater?
So I was inspired by the complexity of staging a live performance. You guys went through all that, the complexity of rehabilitating this building to make it its original thing. Cabernet Sauvignon started off as a wild, unselected grape. It's the love child, I like to say, of Sauvignon Blanc, a white wine, and Cabernet Franc, the wine of the Loire Valley. It was stolen by, we'll call them gypsies. It was stolen by people in the 1600s and created itself in a new location. It's the powerhouse. It's the grandeur. It announces the structure and is reflective of its purpose. And as Mark mentioned, its ageability reveals itself each time you open a new bottle with each new opening night. All of the wines I've selected today are equally ageable. I know that's going to shock you. White wines age just as well as red wines. It's not tannin that ages wine, it's acidity. And that's what Cabernet Sauvignon has in spades from its two parents, Cabernet Franc and Sauvignon Blanc. So I thought adding the two wines that we had selected before, the complexity of putting those two wines together to make a third grape entirely, to make a new and terrific big reveal. So thank you guys so much for offering me this opportunity to select some wines for these terrific, inspiring projects. I hope to see you soon. I'll be in California in June. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Martha.
Oh, thank you, Martha. And I don't know if you're able to hang around with us, but I would love to have you with us for the questions. And I will at this time invite everybody who is a speaker today to enable your video. And we do have a few minutes, about 12 minutes here for questions if you have time. And I'm going to open it up to the audience. And again, if you'd like to ask questions, you can use the Q&A box, either about the projects or the wines. I'm sure Martha has plenty of other ideas on some of these wines. Martha, I think, I don't know if I ever mentioned, but my favorite varietal is a Gewürztraminer, because I like the sweeter things in life.
Spicy one.
Yeah.
It's known as the little spicy one. Yes, it's unique. It's a Alsatian dialect, which is a mixture between French and German. And yes, it's one of my favorites too.
And I don't know if, while you're answering your questions for the other panelists, let us know what your favorite is. And also for the attendees, let us know in the chat box what your favorite is. We do have a question here from Jeff, and this is specifically for the project that Kara presented. What was the, if you're able to reveal this, I don't know if you are Kara, what was the cost of replacing the church window?
I'm not sure if I can give you the exact cost of everything, because it wasn't just I don't know the cost of replacing the window, because I know that we had an initial estimate of $900,000 from a local contractor, which we did the fundraising based on that. The actual cost was well over $2 million to do the east facade. The window, I can't separate that cost out. I mean, it was a lot over $2 million actually. So that was, we were led astray by not having the right people in place when we started.
Yeah, and I don't know if you mentioned this during your presentation, but raising the money is a whole other side of this project that I think it's revealing that you were able to raise that in various ways. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about how you were able to raise the money for this.
Well, we did the initial, as I said, we had a local contractor who had some experience with historic preservation in residential sites around town, and we didn't know where to start. So we had him come in, he looked at it. I knew that because I am a conservator, I knew that his approach was not in line with what my approach would be just with any kind of piece of art. So we knew that we weren't really on the right track with him, but he did give us some framework for fundraising, which we needed to do before we could go forward. The other thing I didn't add is that there was major reconstruction going on downtown, tearing down old buildings. That's why we jumped in on taking our windows out, because you could feel the vibration from the construction projects around. You could feel it on the walls of the building. So we kind of just jumped in and did our initial thing was a capital campaign within the congregation. Our congregation is fairly small. There are only about 150 families, and we managed to raise $1.1 million. We also got $50,000 for that initial window project from a local foundation. And altogether, we got $150,000 from them with 3 different grants. We got money from the Partners for Sacred Places, which they gave us a $250,000 2-to-1 match grant. So we had to sell our last piece of property, and we matched that. So we got $750,000 for that altogether. And so we had raised about not quite 2 million in the end, and we still have more to raise to pay off that, and we still have to do the north facade. So it's difficult for a church because the foundations don't tend to give money to churches. So raising funds is really difficult. And that is our biggest issue right now. But we are so much more than just a church to this community. I mean, we're optimistic we can figure this out, but none of us do this professionally. And we're just we're doing our best, but it's not easy. Raising the funds is really hard.
Yes, I think our other panelists might agree with you on that even. And I don't see any other questions, but maybe my question for our panel here is, out of your projects, and those of you who would like to answer, feel free to answer, maybe I'll call on somebody first, but your projects, what was the most challenging aspect of your project? The one that basically made you want to pull your hair out? And how did you overcome that? And maybe I'll start with Elizabeth, because I'm sure there were challenges with that project, especially adding the second floor and making sure the windows, the glazing was there, and retaining as much as you could, and maybe the challenges of working with the planning department and everything. Whatever you think was the most challenging.
I think the most challenging aspect of that project was advocating for reuse of the historic windows. There were some in the city that felt that they were in horrible shape and deteriorated beyond repair and needed to be replaced. But we went out and we did a detailed survey several times and provided them with comprehensive information, and were able to convince them, particularly Nancy Goldenberg, put up a good argument for retaining the windows. And I mean, that conversation was 2 or 3 years long, getting them to, agree to that. And it was very challenging. The monitor windows on the south side were very deteriorated. So those got replaced, but everything else was repaired and pretty minimally repaired too. So that was a big win, but a big challenge. So
That's good to know. Now, do any other of you anybody else from the other projects had any challenges that stick out? I see Robert raising his hand. So
Yeah, if I could. On the picture bridge, we'd initially proposed to reconstruct the picture bridge. And in working with Pasadena Heritage, we were encouraged to engage an additional structural engineer to do a peer review. So that's how we came up with the approach that was a hybrid of retaining the roof and the abutments in place and replacing much of the supporting structure of the roof. So the structural engineer of record was Craig Chamberlain at IMEG, and David Koch and Structural Focus did the peer review. So that was a really good exercise. It did take a few years, and we got to the point at which our temporary and permanent shoring of the bridge was starting to show wear. So we had to make a move. So we did. So all the stars aligned in that regard.
And Mark with the Presidio Theater.
A couple of things. The site for the Presidio Theater originally was a stream bed in the Presidio. And when the original Mexican fort was built, they flattened out that portion of the Presidio main and filled this stream bed in. So unbeknownst to us, under the theater ran a subterranean stream, which when we started excavating under the audience hall, guess what poked up? And so we had water in footings coming through. So solving that, seemed like it was going to be daunting. We had a great waterproofing expert who helped us solve it in rather quick order. However, there was also an unmapped gas line running next to the theater, very close to the site of our green room pavilion. And it turns out that PG&E had an unrecorded easement on the space. And actually, in order to get them to review engineering drawings, which we did, took months and months and months, and stopped the final completion of that portion of the theater to try and get permits from PG&E, even though they weren't serving the building directly. So that was our little challenge.
Sounds like a double surprise there. It's funny, in San Francisco, there are a lot of landmarks that have streams running under them, and you wouldn't know it. I'm thinking of the Armory on Mission Street, which also has a stream running under it.
Sure, same thing.
Yeah. Well, if I'm looking around for anybody else, if you had anything you wanted to mention in terms of challenges, but I first of all wanted to thank Martha, who has really made this possible. She's worked hand in hand with CPF over the last 3 months, Martha, at least, and we've put a lot of thought into this. So they were very intentionally chosen wines with very intentional connections to your projects, and we hope you'll join us for next week's award celebration. If you're unable to attend, we will be recording the celebration and we'll make it available for free to the public. So we'll point you to that recording. If you're able to be there in person at San Francisco, you're more than welcome. We would love to have you. The theater fits 400. We're going to hopefully fill it up. And we have 16 award winners this year and 2 President's Award recipients who will be announcing at the theater next week. So finally, the auction bidding is open. Martha and Cindy and I have been working around the clock trying to get some items added. There are 12 items on there right now. There will be 13 hopefully later today. And we would love for you to bid on items. They've been offered, the starting bid has been generously below the retail price of most of these items, and the wineries have been very generous to us in donating these items. We will be listing and acknowledging these wineries in our program book for the awards program, and just wanted to thank also our sponsors for the awards, for the conference, our annual sponsors. Many of you are here with us today, so we thank you for your contribution to our educational programs, and we look forward to next week. So thank you again, and it's been a great educational hour and a half for me. So this will be available as a recording on our YouTube channel, on our Facebook channel, and feel free to email us if you can't find the recording. And have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you all.
Bye.